Shalom Aleichem. We're going to discuss a few words regarding the coming parasha of this coming Shabbat, Parashat Vayechi. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Now we all know that this parasha is going to tell us about the death of Yaakov, our father Jacob. And yet, the parasha itself is known as Parashat Vayechi, which means, and Yaakov lived. Now, apparently, it should have been noted that the parasha is Vayamot, that he died. But instead, the parasha prefers to begin with the words Vayechi, and he lived, and Yaakov lived 17 years in Egypt, and so forth. Why is that? Well, we can allow ourselves to say that there is no such a thing as death by a righteous person. Yaakov Avinu, our father Jacob, did not die. Our sages say that Yaakov Avinu lo met, never died. Our sages ask the question, what do you mean he did not die? I mean, the parasha is telling us the description of how they took care of his body until they took his body to the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, and that's where he was buried. I mean, even the description of his burial. And you tell me that Yaakov did not die? So we understand that this was said in the figurative sense, which means Yaakov, our father Jacob, represents the people of Israel, and the people of Israel, Am Yisrael Chai. The people of Israel never dies. I mean, we do know that. Of course, that does not mean that the people of Israel will not be hurt. I mean, we have been hurt for generations, for thousands of years by the nations. The nations tried very much to exterminate us, and they did everything they can. And yet we are here again and again. Whoever thought that after the recent Holocaust, just a few years ago, when we lost 6 million of our people, whoever thought after that there would be any survival for the Jewish people? I mean, I know that even when they wanted to inaugurate the state of Israel, first we wanted to see what is the opinion of the world about it. I mean, the United Nations, they declared that the Jewish people have a right for a homeland. And yet today we see that this United Nations place is always against the Jewish people. What's going on? And yet they were very instrumental in beginning the state of Israel. Well, some people say that does not mean they don't hate us or they stopped to hate us. But they thought that after the Holocaust, it was immediately after the Holocaust. I mean, the Holocaust ended in 1945, right? And the state of Israel was inaugurated in 1948. Now, the Jewish people were still counting their deads, and the Jewish people was still so wounded in whoever was left. I mean, the remnant of the Jewish people was wounded to the heart, and whoever thought that we would survive. So the United Nations thought that we are finished anyway, so might as well give them a piece of land until they are completely eradicated. It's perhaps a little harsh to say that, but we have suffered so much from the injustice that has been inflicted upon us from the United Nations, and I hope God will, I don't know if God will forgive them. There is a payment for everything. But there is no question about it that we have survived. I mean, immediately after in 1948, when the Jewish people came to the land of Israel, and the Arabs did not tolerate us, so they began a war against us. I mean, all the neighboring Arab nations came all together to fight with us, and we had nothing. We had no army. I mean, just a few pockets here and there. I mean, no arms, forget it. I mean, my own brother Yosef, God bless him, he was there. And he said that everyone waited for his friend to die so that they can pick up his rifle. And that's how they fought against 5 Arab nations with tanks and everything that you need to lead a war. And yet we won. We won the war. And believe me, we won in a way that is unbelievable, practically impossible to describe. And books were written upon that. Why is it that they came all together? They thought that it's impossible. The Jewish people are totally decimated after the Holocaust. And probably the remnant will not desire to continue to live as Jews. They would prefer to go to other religions, perhaps. So God has a different plan. And not only we won the wars, but we won the war in 1948, we won the war in 1956, we won the war, the Great War of the 67th, the 6 Days War. What a brilliant victory. And all this shows that God finally said, enough, and the Jewish people now are returning to the land of Israel, to the land of their forefathers. And we know that it's only the beginning for the Jewish people, right? And the world is astonished. That's what's going on. We thought that the Jewish people is going to disappear after the Holocaust, but not only they did not disappear, they survived, and now they are a real force to contend with in the world. There's no question that there is a God, and the God is the God of Israel. Of course, we would like one day that there should be peace between the nations and the people of Israel. Even among the Arabs who hate us so much. But we know and we believe that one day they will come to their senses, knowing that in fact to have the Jewish people near them is rather a great benefit. It's a great source of tremendous value to have the Jewish people, although we are not too many in the world compared to the hundreds of millions of the Arabs. But at the same time, we are a pocket that can bring so much light to the world. And that's why it's so difficult to understand the world, and especially the Arabs. Well, there's so much more to say about this, but that's not the issue of this parasha only. Only we wanted to explain that Vayechi Yaakov, why is it that the parasha which is describing the burial, the death of Yaakov, our father, begins with the word, and he lived, which means Yaakov, our father, cannot die. Am Yisrael Chai. The people of Israel is alive forever and ever. And whoever tries to finish with us, he might succeed to hurt us because we are not perfect. He might succeed to wound us, but he cannot eradicate us because we are the children of God, and it looks like we are going to prove it. Even though among our own people, the people of Israel, we have so many who do not believe so, but still you have to look upon one thing. It's true that we have many secular Jews who do not observe the mitzvot. And it's true that we have to love them just the same. But at the same time we have to understand something. The secular Jews are here in Israel, and sometimes they even show hatred against the religious people. But there is something that does not make sense. If so to speak, they hate their religion, why don't they go to other religions? I mean, why do they have to live as Jews here in the land of Israel? The fact that the Jew who is secular wants to be a Jew. Let me tell you a little story. In the time of the Inquisition, about 500 years ago, when the Inquisition, the Christian Inquisition came, and they did so much against us, and they forced the Jewish people, they tried to force them to convert to Christianity. Even though there were many who at least in the open they became Christians, but in hiding they kept being Jewish. We call them the Marranos. But so many of them prefer to die. You know, that's what the Inquisition wanted. Either you convert to Christianity, or you die by the fire, or you leave the country of Spain. And the Jews, by the hundreds of thousands of Jews that chose to leave Spain rather than to commit themselves to change their religion, is showing something unbelievable. So you might think that they were all very religious. That's not the case. There is a great sage who lived then at that time. He's known as the Ya'betz. He's known by us by the Chassid, the pious Ya'betz. He wrote a commentary on the Pirkei Avot, on the Book of the Fathers. And he cites a great phenomenon, unbelievable. He says, there were many Jews at that time in 1492, at the time when they were expelled from Spain, which was a great tragedy, no question about it. But there were many Jews who became very secular. Some of them even forgot completely that they were Jews. He cites the story of one person. He says, there was a person, a Jew, but he himself had nothing to do with Jewishness. He did not observe the Torah, no mitzvot, no nothing. And he was a very famous man. He was a great tenor who appeared in all the royal courts of Europe. And talk to him about Judaism, he hardly knows that he was born as a Jew. And yet, the Inquisition came upon him and told him, well, you could retain your riches, your fame and everything, but all you have to do is to convert to Christianity, because we know you are a Jew. He said, oh, I am a Jew. Oh, I almost forgot that I am a Jew. Very nice. So they wanted him, either you convert to their religion or you die. Willingly, he preferred to die. He was burned to death. Why? Because he didn't want to relinquish his heritage, his Jewish heritage. But what kind of heritage? He has nothing left. All he had was the fact that he knows he was born as a Jew. Do you understand how bizarre the Jewish people is? I mean, you are against the Torah. You are against religious people. Why do you stay as Jews? Why would you want to be in the land of Israel, which is surrounded by wolves who want to decimate you? And yet, you know that no one will relinquish his Jewishness. I am a Jew. Whether I keep the mitzvot or not, that's a different story. But I am a Jew, and he's willing to die for it. Yes, it is true that some Jews may be converted. But we know that we are here again, showing the world that we are here not only as a living people, but we are a light. And the world is little by little recognizing that fact. We are a light for the nations. The world is indeed astonished. How come this nation is still alive? Many of the great Christian, non-Jewish thinkers have said so, that there is something unbelievable about this nation. And why not? We are the nation that has been designated to represent God in this world, and at the end this is what's going to happen. As the prophecy is quite clear, the prophets, Yeshaya and Yirmiyah and Hosea and Zechariah and Malachi, all these great prophets have given us the clear prophecy that the day will come. Venilvu elav kol hagoyim. All the nations are going to come to ask the Jewish people, let us be with you. Now, of course, we don't see that today, but we see a few signs. I just heard that there are in Africa, in dark Africa, in the jungle, there are about 2,000 people, Jews, who converted to Judaism. And they pray with devotion. And this is something unbelievable. Very recently I heard about it. And it shows that there is something that's beginning in the world. Now that doesn't mean that the Jew is proud and... no, it's not the point. It is just a certain actuality that we cannot run away from. It is something that the Jew cannot run away from his Jewishness. Why? Because if he is a descendant of Abraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov, he has no choice. He is a Jew and he is proud to be a Jew, even though we are just a few compared to the nations. But then again, see that the nations, India, China, Japan, and many, many other people all over the world, that do recognize the fact that the Jewish nation is a nation that is very special. It cannot die. Vayechi Yaakov. And Jacob and Yaakov lived, which means we cannot describe him as dead because Yaakov Avinu lo met, the Midrash says. Yaakov Avinu never died. And since he represents the people of Israel, it means that the Jewish people cannot die. Now, there is here something that I have to add for this parasha. Rashi says that there is something very special about this particular parasha. I mean, every kind of parasha of the week, of every week, begins, there is a conclusion of the previous parasha, then you go to the next line, and the previous line remains open. But then you go to the next line and you begin a new parasha. Right? It's very normal. But Parashat Vayechi is different. It is a different parasha indeed, which we will read this coming Shabbat, and yet when you open the scroll of the Torah, you will see that Vayechi Yaakov and Yaakov lived, which is the beginning of the parasha, but it doesn't go to the next line. It's like the line is closed. Last week's parasha, before this coming week's parasha, are on the same line. It's called a clogged, a closed parasha. And therefore the question is, why? Why is it that this parasha, of all the parashiot, does not go to the next line when it begins, but rather it continues from the last parasha? The same line, with a difference, with a space of one letter between last week's parasha and this coming parasha, Parashat Vayechi. Why is that? There is a reason behind everything. So it's called in Hebrew, Lama Parasha Zostuma. Why is it that this parasha is closed? And our sages said, because when Yaakov Avinu, Rashi says that when Yaakov Avinu niftar, when he passed away, even though we said that he is alive, but his body had to die, he had to be buried, right? We spoke about his spirituality, or the fact that he represents the Jewish people, right? He's our father. But since we know we're going to talk about his death and his burial, therefore, nistemu enehem velibam shel Yisrael. When he passed away, then the heart of the Jewish people there in Egypt, the 12 tribes, their heart became closed. Why? Because apparently the slavery began. We know that the Jewish people are going to be enslaved in Egypt, right? As the prophecy, as God said to Abraham, that your children, your great-grandchildren are going to be 400 years in exile and in slavery. Real slavery took 210 years. And the rest has to be counted from the time of our father Yitzchak till the sortie from Egypt. But at the same time, when Yaakov Avinu, when our father Jacob passed away, the heart of Israel became closed. What does it mean? Mitzarat ha-shi'bud. The Rashi says, because of the problem of the trouble of the slavery. But hold it a minute. Slavery didn't start then. Maybe 100 years later. But at that time, there was no slavery. I mean, our sages say in the Midrash, Bereshit Rabbah, that the slavery began only when the last of the brothers passed away. Vayamot Yosef bechol echa bechol ador hahu. This is a passage that we read in the next parasha of next week, Shemot. That's when it says, Vayamot Yosef, when Yosef passed away, and he was the last of his brothers, and all of them perished. When all of them died, then their children and their grandchildren were enslaved. But that took quite a few years. So how come you tell me that when Yaakov Avinu passed away, their heart became closed because of the slavery that began? Understand the question? And the answer is that slavery does not mean only physical slavery. It begins always with a spiritual slavery. When our father Yaakov was alive, he was the pride of the family. The children did not even think to sway away from Judaism or to fall into the temptations of Egypt, then the biggest empire in the world. They were under the scrutiny of their father. Their father Yaakov protected them, and of course he kept his eyes open towards the behavior of his children. Well, as an example, let me cite one example. When God spoke to Abraham, he said to him, Ki ger yeh zar'acha be'eretz lo lahem. Your descendants are going to be strangers in the land which is not their land, the land of Egypt. Ger is a person who is a stranger. It could be. It is considered also ger means a converted guy. A guy who converts to Judaism is known as a ger. But it means also gerim, ki gerim eitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, which means you were strangers in the land of Egypt. In the time of Yaakov, when Yaakov was alive, the Jewish people then, the tribes, were very much respected, esteemed by everyone in Egypt. They were considered almost like gods. Because, of course, of the greatness of Yosef, who was the king of Egypt, practically saved Egypt from famine. He saved the world also. And the Egyptian people knew that very much, and therefore they regarded this family as a very special family. But as long as the father Yaakov was alive, then the children kept on remembering all the time that even though they are in the land of Egypt, but they consider themselves as strangers. Our sages said, "Shelo shinu et shmam," they did never change their names. "Shelo shinu et leshonam," they did not change their language. They kept the Hebrew, the holy language, in their mouth. And "Shelo shinu et shemam, shelo shinu et leshonam, ve-shelo shinu et levusham." Even the way they dressed was different than the rest of the Egyptian people. They did not dress like them. Why? Because their father Yaakov kept on looking at them. Don't you be like them, because you have to be different. Therefore, the fact that they kept their language, their original language, the Hebrew language, that's protected them from being assimilated. The fact that they retained their language and their names. I mean, if someone was named as Reuven, he did not become a George or Reuben. He stayed as Reuven, and Shimon did not become Simon. He stayed as Shimon, and so forth and so forth. That helped and protected them from being assimilated. Even the way they dressed helped very much psychologically. It helped very much to remind them of as to what they are and how they should remain. But that only as long as their father was alive. When Yaakov died, all this has changed. And now the tribes, of course, they spread, they became very, very many, and very numerous. I mean, they counted in the hundreds of thousands. There is so much more to say about those things. So little by little, you know what happens? It's only nature. When you are different than the other people, and you are among them and you live with them, little by little, hatred and jealousy will infiltrate, and they will start to create a certain animosity between the people, the originals of that country, and the people who are still strangers, because they are different than us. They don't eat what we eat. They don't speak the language that we speak. They don't dress the way we are. And little by little, it becomes hatred. Even though they remembered, I mean, they know the gratitude that they should feel towards the Jewish people because of Yosef. But nature is nature. The Jewish people was always different, and that's the reason why the Jewish people was hated very much. Throughout the generations we were hated, and we know why. But it's worth it. It's worth it because we have a mission to accomplish in the world. At the end we shall see the light, and the world will see the light. So in Egypt that's what happened. The people of Israel, I mean the children of Yaakov, the children of Israel, they started to see themselves not anymore as strangers. As long as they looked strangers, they were somehow protected. But since the father is not here anymore, they feel that they were liberated from that, and the assimilation began. With that began also the bad feeling. That's called also slavery. But at the same time, the spiritual slavery is that they were not anymore protected spiritually by their father, and therefore they felt that now they can assimilate. That's a spiritual slavery. They acceded to the temptations of the country. They became more and more into the life of the Egyptians. That apparently should have created, in fact, a great friendship, and automatically they would be considered like the originals, like the people of the country. But that's not how it works with the Jewish people. The more you forget about Judaism, the more you forget about your mission in life as a Jew, the more the world will see you as a stranger. You are in our world. You are in our land. You have nothing to do with our land. Get out. Wherever the Jewish people went, they were not liked. After 1492, when the Jewish people, more than 700,000 people, Jews, left Spain just because they wanted to remain Jewish. They were not accepted by any place. There is one statement by a great rabbi who lived approximately maybe 100 and more years ago. He is a great Talmudic scholar, and he wrote beautiful commentaries, and one of them is the Tosefet Bracha. It's 5 volumes, commentaries on the Torah. And he says, his name is Rabbi Epstein, Rabbi Baruch Epstein. And he writes in his book, in the 2nd volume of Tosefet Bracha, in Parashat Yitro, in one of the pasuk, one of the phrases there, Vihitem li segula mikol ha'amim. That's where he says that the family, Segal family, they used to be Leviim from the Levite tribe. But he he reveals to us his true identity. He says, yeah, we are known today as Epstein, but our true, he writes right there at that pasuk, "V'yitem li segula mikol ha'amim," which is brought in the Parashat of Yitro. He writes under the lines that we in fact are a Sephardic family, which used to be known in the time in Spain as Ben Benishti family, a very prominent Jewish family, Sephardic family. But because they were persecuted and they had to leave Spain in 1492, they had to find a place where to settle. And no place gave them the possibility to settle until they arrived to Germany, to a place, to a small city near the river Epstein River. And there they were welcomed, and they were capable now of beginning a new life and to settle comfortably as much as possible in the new place. As an act of gratitude, he said, we changed our name, Ben Benisti, which was still dangerous to keep because the Inquisition was after them, and they changed their name to Epstein. So what I'm trying here to say, that the Jewish people, even though after they were expelled from Spain, there still was not easy to find a place where they could settle. But finally they settled, many of them in Ashkenazi countries, others in Turkey, in Morocco, of course. So many went to Morocco, and that's how the Jewish population in Morocco became a two-faces population, Jewish population. There were the Toshavim and the Megorashim. Those who were exiled came from Spain, like the Toledano family, for example, directly from Spain, and those people who originated in Morocco since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. So, Baruch Hashem, all of them are great Jews and everything, no question about it, with differences of customs and everything. But that doesn't mean that it was easy to relocate or to go elsewhere. But the Jewish people were willing to sacrifice themselves, to leave their possessions behind. So many times Jews left their possessions and they relinquished everything just so for one single reason, to remain Jewish. And God helped. And in Morocco, for example, a great community. I mean, they counted almost 1 million Jews. And of course in Europe, and even in Germany, unfortunately, where we had a terrible Holocaust. But we are still here to say that we have survived. Yaakov Avinu Lomet, our father Jacob, did not die, and therefore Am Yisrael Chai. The Jewish people is alive and will continue to be alive till the end of times. Shabbat Shalom.